Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shobowale. On the program this week, Russia launches all-out assault on eastern Ukraine, plus South African residents hit by floods begin to rebuild their homes. Russia launched its long-awaited all-out assault on eastern Ukraine this week, unleashing thousands of troops in what Ukraine describes as the Battle of the Donbass. A long-time focus for Russia, the Donbass region includes two Russian-backed separatist republics in Luhansk and Donetsk. They've been fighting Ukrainian forces for years.
Russia on Tuesday announced the beginning of a new phase of what it calls its special military operation in Ukraine. The new military offensive in places like Donetsk is expected to add to the horror of local residents who have endured continuous military confrontation over the past 8 years. Many say they are worried about their safety and tired of the fighting. Leader Bodrova says the building where she used to live on the 9th floor was bombarded 2 weeks ago, and she was lucky that she was not at home, but the memories of the shelling are still fresh for her.
You don't know which side the shrapnel will fly at you, so of course, it's very scary.
In a village which is only about 5 kilometers from the front line, a wall was fired through by bullets in 2015.
There are no windows. All windows were blown away by the blast. The plaster of the walls fell off. The house was in a very bad condition.
Katya Pavlenko, who has a family of 4 members, says her family has moved multiple times in the past few years, and as a result, the children have stopped going to school.
We can hear the shelling as the military actions resumed. But we have hope. We believe it will end. When we hear the bomb shelling, we don't know when it will be over, but we have hope.
As for soldiers, many of the veterans have been fighting in the region for nearly 8 years, and they do not know whether they can protect civilians amid another military offensive.
Civilians will suffer from our enemy. That's why we try to block large cities instead of going into the cities, so as to minimize the impact of our military operation on civilian lives.
A number of men have been mobilized to join the army in the city. And now in the streets of Donetsk, a slogan is everywhere which says, "We won in 1943 and will win now." In downtown Donetsk, streets are quiet. Not many people would venture out as some bomb blasts are being heard from time to time. Locals say that they are scared, but more importantly, they are tired of the continuous fighting. The invasion, which Russia calls a special military operation, has left a trail of death and destruction that has drawn condemnation from Western countries and triggered concerns about Russian President Vladimir Putin's broader ambitions. About a quarter of Ukraine's 44 million population have been forced from their homes, cities turned into rubble, and thousands of people have been killed or injured, many of them civilians. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday called for a 4-day Orthodox Easter humanitarian pause in fighting to allow for the safe passage of civilians to leave areas of conflict and the delivery of humanitarian aid to hard-hit areas.
The humanitarian pause would provide the necessary conditions to meet 2 crucial imperatives. First, safe passage of all civilians willing to leave the areas of current and expected confrontation in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Second, beyond humanitarian operations already taking place, a pause will allow for the safe delivery of life-saving humanitarian aid to people in the hardest hit areas such as Mariupol, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk.
Russia rejected the request, saying it would only provide time to arm Ukrainian fighters.
Away from Ukraine, thousands of people affected by the floods in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, are eagerly awaiting government's promised help to start rebuilding their lives. Over 440 people have been confirmed dead. Homes, healthcare facilities, as well as more than 500 schools have been destroyed. Channels Television visited some of the affected areas, and our South Africa Bureau Chief brings a picture of the situation in Inanda area of the province.
Inanda is one of the areas or towns severely affected in the recent floods in KwaZulu-Natal. And we're here in Inanda, but the Mzinyati community, many of the homes along the banks of the Mzinyati River that you see behind me were affected. No less than 45 people here alone were affected. And also in this area, the body of a baby no more than 4 months old was washed against the backyard of one of the homes here. And on my left, up the hill, it's an area still in Inanda where a family of 11 people perished in the mudslides that followed the flood. It was difficult trying to walk in the footsteps of the affected persons. This pile, extremely close to the Mzinyati River, used to be the Mieza's 4-bedroom home.
We were just standing there by the neighbor. We heard the sound while the building was collapsing.
For the Bangus, it seemed funny at first, till the swollen river almost engulfed their home.
I was in the house and we ran away, me and my parents and my daughter, because everything happened so fast. Yeah.
It looks like the water was quite high. How high was it?
It was high because, do you see the level of televisions in the wall? Yes, everything was messed up. The whole house was flooded. It was bad.
For Zetu Kumalo, a toilet unit from another home up the hill broke and emptied itself on hers.
Only I need is the help because there is a toilet in my roof. No one going to, because it's heavy. I can't take it with my hands, and even my husband can't even move all these things.
The Mkize's home escaped the swollen river by a hair's breadth.
My mother and father started to pray and pray. Then the water started to move down. That's how we survived by the cleanup.
Across the affected areas, rural and urban, the sight wasn't pretty. While some affected people are trying to salvage and rebuild, some homes still sitting on floodplains are disasters waiting to happen. Not even the usually clean Durban beach was spared.
People were like, they were digging, they were looking actually for bodies, you know. They will tell you, if you ask them, that my house was here, but my brother is still missing. I'm still looking for him.
We came across a search and rescue crew watched closely by distraught family members. This search was for 6 out of 10 missing members of one family. Only 4 bodies had been found at this time.
We have found a number of people already, but we're continuing the search.
In which areas?
All over.
President Cyril Ramaphosa Monday night announced 3-phase measures to support affected persons and rebuild what's been destroyed. But given the usual corruption and diversion deals, some are skeptical help will come.
First, we will focus on the immediate humanitarian relief, ensuring that all affected persons are safe and that their basic needs are met. Second, we will focus on stabilization and recovery, rehousing people who have lost homes, and restoring provision of services. And thirdly, we will focus on reconstruction and rebuilding, as many areas have been destroyed and devastated, including infrastructure.
Mop up and rebuilding will take time, but every hour of every day will count to start and see that journey through. weather permitting. The South African government has approved 1 billion rand to help victims of this latest flooding to start to rebuild their lives and their communities. But what's important for most of them, especially with search and rescue efforts still continuing, is for them to at least recover the bodies of loved ones they have lost. From Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Over in Somalia, the country is facing its most severe drought in over 3 decades, with more than half of the population in dire need of food and water. The United Nations estimates 7.7 million people, or more than half of the population, are facing severe hunger or starvation this year. Desperately needed rainfall across the Horn of Africa has so far failed to come almost a month into the current rainy season.
Dead livestock, malnourished children, and a constant call for help has become the norm in Somalia as a severe drought ravages the Horn of Africa nation. Located in the southern federal member state of Jubaland, Dalo has been hard hit by Somalia's current wave of drought. 3 IDP camps have sprung up since November 2021 alone due to an influx of newly arrived IDPs. With close to 3 million people already internally displaced by previous droughts and conflicts, Somalia is now forced to contend with more displacements amid shrinking donor aid to redeem the situation.
The resources are not anywhere near enough. Everywhere you go, look at these people behind me. All of them are new arrivals. 400 families arrived in the past 2 weeks alone in this single IDP camp, and there are many around Dolo.
The country is facing the risk of famine as a combination of poor rainfall, skyrocketing food prices, and huge funding shortfalls, leaving almost 40% of Somalis, around 6 million people, facing critical levels of food insecurity.
We cannot really overemphasize the fact that the drought situation is getting worse, and we're actually moving from a drought response now into a prevention of famine. So it is getting more intense, it is getting more severe, it's getting more acute. And of course, all of the indicators are that this situation will get a little bit more severe because, one, we are expecting probably the 4th failed rain season.
Children under 5 are amongst the most vulnerable as the drought worsens and access to food and milk is very scarce. According to the UN, around 1.4 million children face acute malnutrition through the end of this year, with around a quarter of them, or 330,000 children, facing severe acute malnutrition.
Funding's everything. I mean, we have the expertise, we have the people, we have the communities who do it for themselves, but what they need are the supplies. So the money is for the supplies. It's for plum peanut, it's for, in severe cases, special milk for severely malnourished. You need the chlorine tablets, you need to truck the water, you need all of those things. We need recreation kits for children. They need to play, they need to have a childhood.
The war in Ukraine is also having an impact on the situation in Somalia. Previously, up to 85% of Somalia's wheat imports came from Russia and Ukraine. That has stopped, leading to price increases of 160% in just 1 month.
I know that the world is very much occupied by Ukraine, but human suffering is human suffering, no matter whether in Europe or Asia or Africa. And here we have to uplift, to live to our moral values. And our moral values, humanity matters. If we are not responding now and we are not increase our response, those people will be heading to famine. And that is not acceptable.
Weather forecasts are predicting an average to below average rainy season for Somalia. More than 80% of the country has remained generally dry, and water and staple food prices have experienced dramatic price hikes.
After 3 failed rainy seasons, it's estimated that the region is the driest it has been in 40 years. We're now waiting for the current rainy season to arrive. It's late, and we're very concerned of what the implications will be if it is below average. The estimates suggest that the numbers affected could skyrocket to 20 million people. We need the ability to respond. We need the rain.
The United Nations says if the funding gap is not urgently addressed, it will contribute to worse outcomes with the real risk of widespread famine. The last time such a humanitarian tragedy struck Somalia was in 2011, when famine conditions killed 250,000 people.
With COVID showing no signs of slowing down, Shanghai has decided to ease some of the restrictions that have hit residents and businesses hard. Tough lockdown measures after an outbreak began in early March left the city's 25 million people struggling with the loss of income, irregular food supplies, family separations, and poor conditions in isolation.
While 16.3 million people are still barred from leaving flats or housing compounds in Shanghai, 7.85 million can return to factories or walk outside, a rise of 2 million from last week. Areas which have no new cases in a week will be marked as control, and if they reach 2 weeks with no new cases, they'll be further downgraded to prevention. People in the zones with fewer or no cases will have more freedom, such as being allowed to move around within their housing compounds. The city has conducted more than 37 million tests since April 15 and will carry out tests for 3 days in lockdown areas.
The cases have shown a downward trend in the past few days. The number of neighborhoods and towns reporting more than 100 daily new cases have been going down for 3 consecutive days, and community transmission has been effectively curbed. Over the last few days, we have focused on carrying out tests and screenings in the closed-off management areas, restrictive control areas, and prevention areas.
Public transport remains shut, unapproved vehicles are not allowed on the roads, and the only people able to move around relatively freely are the police, delivery drivers, neighborhood committee members, and healthcare workers. Many factories are now also opening up in closed-loop systems where workers have to live on site to maintain zero contact with outsiders. The move comes at a time when the city continues to report tens of thousands of cases a day, with the majority among people in quarantine or isolation. The city of 25 million people has been placed under strict lockdown since March after a spike in positive infections owing to the Omicron variant. The harsh shutdown, which is part of China's zero-COVID policy, has badly affected the economy and thrown global supply lines into disarray. Under China's zero-COVID policy, everyone who tests positive must quarantine at designated sites, and the neighbors are asked to isolate in their homes for 14 days. Residents have complained of job losses, scarcity of food, family separations, and deplorable conditions in the quarantine centers.
Over in Hong Kong, these strict COVID policies have been criticized for damaging the economy and mental health. Environmentalists also say they hurt the environment by generating excess waste.
From remote controls wrapped in cellophane to pillows encased in plastic bags. Right now, new arrivals in Hong Kong are met by single-use plastic everywhere they turn. The city is one of the few places that holds to a zero-COVID policy, which means travelers are required to quarantine in a hotel on arrival. The policy has been criticized not only for the impact on mental health and the economy, but environmentalists say it also leads to excess waste.
Every single one of the staff members here wears full PPE, the gowns, the gloves, the booties, the hats, and that's every staff member on every floor. All the kind of surfaces that typically you would touch with your hands, like the phones, the remote controllers, everything's been cellophane wrapped. The meals arrive 3 times a day, so morning, lunch, dinner, and they are all provided in a plastic bag.
According to government figures, Hong Kong disposes of more than 2,300 tons of plastic waste a day. And with a recycling rate of just 11%, most of it ends up in landfill sites.
This disposable face mask is made of plastic. And over time, it will eventually become microplastics and will get into the ocean.
Environmentalists say Hong Kong's approach to COVID reflects its lack of environmental awareness, arguing that plastics from quarantine hotels should be reused or recycled.
Now, for the plastic waste in Hong Kong, we throw away about 2,300 metric ton a day, just a day. And the plastic overall recycling rate for our plastic scrap is about 11% only. So it's a small percentage. And so the rest, nearly 90% of the plastic waste is either end up in our landfills or end up in the glacier.
Hong Kong's strict quarantine policies are intended to halt COVID-19 at the border. The country has quarantined tens of thousands of people this year into facilities for COVID positive and their near contacts.
And finally on the program, let's head over to Ghana, where after 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, thousands of people from around the world have flocked to the north of the capital, Accra, for the country's Paragliding Festival. Residents hope the festival will establish the West African nation as a hub for extreme sports. Take a look.
This year marks Ghana's Paragliding Festival's return to its annual schedule after the COVID-19 pandemic forced organizers to postpone the last 2 years. Around 400 people registered for tandem flights with professional pilots in the towns of Kwahu and Alibi. Dozens brought their own equipment to fly solo. 34-year-old Jonathan Quay first flew in 2006, the festival's second year, as the passenger of an American paraglider. He's been paragliding ever since. Having acquired his tandem certification during the COVID-19 pandemic, he is now the only Ghanaian at the festival certified to carry others into the clouds.
Most people think it's not a safe sport, and people have like a mentality of like, oh no, this is only for white people, that kind of thing. And all those people who say that, they've never been here, so they always discourage their friends, don't do it. But when their friends come and they do it, and like, but it's that easy like that, so why haven't I been doing like that? Then we ask them questions, where can I learn? How do I go about it? Then I also start giving them information.
But the scene is growing, with more Ghanaians taking part.
Jonathan is based here, and I think Kenichi is also based in Ghana. The other two of us, we are outside, like Switzerland and myself in the US. So, sometimes representation is good. When you see people that look like you doing what you're doing, they're like, oh, I could also get into it. See what I'm saying? So I feel it's going to really motivate a lot of people, like, oh, if Stephen can do it, maybe Francis can do it. And people will be open to the idea that, oh, they could actually put their mind to something and get it done.
Quay says paragliding has taught him lessons that have reshaped his professional life in ways he never thought possible. By helping others to fly, he hopes to pass on the principles like patience, tranquility, and risk assessment.
I used to be like quick-tempered. If I drive on the street and you just cross me, I'll just give it to you. But now I look at certain things and I'm like, no, it's not necessary. Let's just let it go. So it has made me a calm person. I look at things like before I make a decision, I have to think and rethink and like just go. Because any decision that I make will affect whatever I do. And it's the same thing in this sport. Conditions are not right, so you just chill, wait. If it's good for you, you can go, So those skill sets that I'm learning has changed my perspective about life, like in a lot of things.
The Ghanaian Paragliding Festival is an annual event held during Easter. Like any other year, the Paragliding Festival, which has become a key highlight of the Easter Festival, attracted a number of patrons from different countries. The 4-day event, which started on Friday, April 15th, came to a climax on Monday, April 18th.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.